Good afternoon. Welcome to the March 17th, 2022 Teachers Retirement System Board meeting. I'm going to start by calling the roll. Thomas Brown,
I'm here.
Cynthia Collins,
Present.
Allison Hirsch, here, David Kazansky,
Present.
Russell Buckley,
Here.
Deborah Penny. Here. We have a quorum. And the first item on our agenda is an update on TRS operations, and Kavita Conway is going to give us that update.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kavita Kanwar. Got that? Okay. TRS has identified approximately 36,000 members who will be due a required minimum distribution from their TDA accounts for 2022. In late April, TRS will send a notification letter with filing instructions to these members. TRS's online educational programs continue to be extremely popular with the members. Since January, over 2,400 members have registered and tuned into our live sessions to learn more about their benefits. On an average, 67 members have attended each of the 36 virtual sessions so far this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavita. Next on the agenda is a report from the actuary. Mike Zammit.
Good afternoon. I've got a few things to talk about. The first is what we call Chapter 41. This is an annual report that we do each year. And this is Chapter 41. This report presents the determination of the costs that TRS incurs as a result of Chapter 41. As a refresher, Chapter 41 of the laws of 2016 permits active members of any public retirement system within the state to purchase additional years of service, up to 3 years for military time, regardless of when or where that military service was performed. Prior to that, only certain conflicts and time periods were accepted in order to put military service. Costs associated with this implementing Chapter 41 are to be reimbursed on an annual basis by the state. These costs right now are included in the annual valuation of TRS and therefore funded by the city. It's the Office of the Actuary's understanding, however, the state has not reimbursed the city for any of these increased costs since the enactment of Chapter 41 back in 2016. But we've calculated this amount this year to be about $329,000 for TRS. And the proposed board resolution approves a voucher for that amount. If you're wondering, it's $329,000 doesn't sound like a big number, but as you can imagine, a couple of the other systems within the NICers have many more members who have military service. And this year alone, the cost for implementing this Chapter 41 is about $10 million for the city, and year to date, it's over $180 million. Anybody have any questions about the Chapter 41 report?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to confirm our members' accounts are made whole for this, despite the fact that the state has not reimbursed us for the costs?
That's correct, Russell. Members continue to get the full pension they're going to get. It's simply that the city is contributing for these extra dollars, where we believe at least that the state should be reimbursing the city.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then I'll move on to the second item. The second item is the final fiscal year 22 employer contribution. The board adopted the updated preliminary contribution for fiscal year 2022 last September. And as a reminder, that updated preliminary contribution was determined based on an actuarial interest rate of 7%, after the original preliminary contribution was determined based on an actuarial interest rate of 6.9%. So the board already adopted the updated preliminary contribution. There's no change from that in these final numbers. So the final 2022 employer contribution that we're asking the board to adopt today is identical to the one that was adopted last September. Any questions on that? Okay, then the third one, the third and final item. And for this one item, I prepared a couple of PowerPoint slides that I sent over earlier today or yesterday, I think. I don't know if those are accessible.
Liz, are you able to unshare those slides?
Yes. I'm bringing them up now.
Okay. It's just a couple of slides to present a few of the highlights of this year's, of the preliminary fiscal year 23 employer contributions. So as soon as they come up. Okay, Liz, if you could move to the next slide. First thing I want to mention, by the way, is that there are no changes to any of the actuarial assumptions and methods for this preliminary FY23 contribution. As you can see on this slide, the contribution decreased from the prior year by about $229 million. And the decrease is primarily due to the excellent investment performance of the planned assets during fiscal year 21. If you remember, that was a terrific year. As you know, we assume that the investment return is 7%. During fiscal year 21, the actual investment return was in excess of 25%. But the QPP's return was actually in excess of 30% after reflecting the TDA fixed fund guarantee. So we assume 7%, the fund actually earned over 30%. And so the fund actually earned about $14 million more than we had assumed. But we don't recognize that 14 billion all in one shot. In order to minimize large fluctuations in employer contributions, actuaries smooth these kinds of gains or losses into the contribution over time. And in this case, in our case, what we do is we recognize 20% of that in each of the next 5 years. So basically, of that $14 billion, we're recognizing 20% or just under 3 billion of that in the fiscal year 23 employer contribution. And the other 80% is really kept as a cushion for future years. And it'll be brought in and to offset the contribution in future years, or to offset losses if we have poor years during that period. And that 20% that we do recognize, which in this case, again, is about 2.8 billion, that gets spread over 15 years. So that gets amortized over 15 years. So again, of this 14 billion, we're really recognizing a very small amount, just a couple $100 million this year. And then it'll over time continue to roll into the contribution, or again, be used to offset poor years. This type of smoothing or something very close to it is used in basically every pension plan. All public pension plans do something like this, again, in order to smooth out the contributions. Another reason for the decrease of the contribution, and if you go to the second slide, Liz, a much smaller reason is the decrease in active members. As you can see on this slide, it's a little small, but if you could see, active members dropped a little over 1,000 from a little over 124,000 active members to a little over 123,000. So we had a drop of about 1,000 members. And that again, that resulted in a small decrease, nothing compared to the investment return. The other interesting thing to note on this is that Tier 6 continues to make up a larger portion of the active membership. As of this date, which was June 30, 21, Tier 6 accounts for over 40% of the actives. So at this point, we're probably getting closer and closer to 50%. But yeah, it doesn't seem like that many years ago where, we were just starting Tier 6.
10 years.
Yeah,
It'll be
10 years.
This coming in. Yeah. Wow,
The other thing you'll note is that as a result of fewer new hires than usual, the average age and average service of the remaining active members increased a little bit. And not a lot, but you can see the average age of the active members went from 44.1 to 44.6. So the average age went up a half a year, and the average service also went up a half a year. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but a plan this size, it stays pretty stable. Those statistics stay pretty stable. So again, you can just tell it's a bit of an unusual year with COVID and everything else that happened. I'm sure it doesn't surprise anybody in this room, but we see it here in these numbers. If you then look at the retired members, about 450 net new pensioners were added to the rolls during the year. And the annual benefits paid to these pensioners increased by about $250 million. And finally, just for completeness, at the bottom, we show other members, it's close to 20,000. These are members that are either vested and due a pension in the future, or have terminated and still have their member contributions in the plan. So they still have a liability due to the plan, so we include them. If you could flip to the last slide then. Not the last slide, this one. Thanks. This shows the assets and the funded status of the plan. And if you look at the top I show the assets of the plan. And I showed two numbers there, market value and actuarial value. The market value is what you think of as the actual assets in the plan. If you look at the asset statement, that's what it shows. That's the amount of assets in the plan. As you can see, they increased tremendously from one year to the next, from 59.3 billion to 78 billion. This actuarial value is the number that's used to determine the employer contribution in the plan. And this is the number that reflects the fact that we're only recognizing 20% of the good performance. So it's the 69.6 billion actuarial value that I'm showing as of June 30, 21. That's the number we use to determine the contribution. And that's, again, how the investment performance is reflected over time by smoothing it in. And you can still see, even on that actuarial value, just recognizing a portion of it, the assets jumped from 62.5 to just under 70 billion. And finally, if you look at the bottom, I just wanted to show the funded status of the plan. Just first, I want to mention that there's lots of different ways to measure the funded status of a pension plan. This is just one measure. What I've shown here is the actuarial accrued liability compared to the actuarial value of assets. And on that basis, the funded status jumped from just under 83% to almost 88%. And obviously, if you looked at measured it under the market value of assets, you'd see a much bigger jump from 20 to 21. So those are the highlights. Again, this is the preliminary contribution. Things could change between now and when the final valuation is done, almost a year from now, depending if there's legislative changes, any actuarial assumption changes, et cetera. Does anybody have any questions about any of this?
Yes, no, just thank you so much, Mike. That was very interesting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is the executive director's report. And the first item on that is the matter of the next meeting. And it has been suggested that the next regular meeting of the Teachers Retirement Board be held on the fourth Thursday of the month, April 28th, 2022. Mark your calendars. Okay, so the first resolution is authorization to the controller of the city of New York to invest certain funds.
Please waive the reading of this resolution.
Okay. All right, so everyone had a chance to look at it. We're going to be voting on authorization to the controller of the city of New York to invest certain QPP funds. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Any questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you for your continued trust in the controls.
Thank you.
Of course.
Next is authorization to the Comptroller of the City of New York to invest certain tax-deferred annuity funds.
Again, please waive the reading of this resolution.
Okay, we're going to be voting on the authorization of the controller for the tax-deferred annuity funds. Right, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Oh, that was
Tie?
I'm not sure. All right, we'll give it to Tom Brown, and that was a second by David Kazansky. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Next is the resolution for the actuary's request to adopt fiscal year 2021 reimbursement calculation resulting from Chapter 41 of the laws of 2016.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the TRS Board of Trustees approves a voucher in the amount of $328,762 for the fiscal year 2021 to be submitted to the State Comptroller for audit, warrant, and payment to TRS as reimbursement for carrying out the provisions of Chapter 41.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So Mr. Brown first all the time. Do I hear a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Next is the request to adopt the actuary's determination for the final fiscal year 2022 employer contribution to the teachers' retirement system of the City of New York.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves a preliminary fiscal year 2023 employer contribution to the New York City teachers' retirement system in the amount of $3,075,301,257.
Correction,
say
I
that
think you
wrong?
jumped ahead.
So what you just did was
Oh, yes,
2023.
there's two resolutions on the same
Yeah.
page. I'm
Yes.
sorry. All right. That the employer contribution to the New York City teachers' retirement system for fiscal year 2022 is the amount of $3,303,797,557. Is hereby approved by the Board of Trustees.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to be clear, we're voting on the 2022 employer contributions. Right, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Oh, good job. Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Do I hear a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay, next, it's the request to adopt the actuary determination for the preliminary fiscal year 2023 employer contributions to the teachers' retirement system of New York City.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves a preliminary fiscal year 2023 employer contribution to New York City teachers' retirement system of $3,075,301,257.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Oh, got it. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do I hear a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Next is the calendar. And first is the approval of the following minutes. The February 3rd, 2022 investment meeting minutes and the February 17th, 2022 board meetings.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the February 3rd and February 17th minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? They are approved.
Okay, so next is other business, and today,
Oh, we have the calendar items.
I'm sorry, the calendar, gosh, I'm really jumping ahead of myself. Next is the calendar items, and you all received an electronic version of the calendar. So, and you've had an opportunity to review that.
Do I hear a motion to approve the calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions about the calendar? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Calendar is approved.
Okay, so next is other business, and under that, we have the CEM presentation, Global Pension History Trends, and Cam Mangat is going to give us that update, that presentation.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon again. So I'll give a brief introduction to CAM. So today we have a presentation by CEM for the board. CEM, which stands for Cost Effectiveness Measurement, provides a comprehensive benchmarking service that compares a pension system's services, costs, volumes, and staffing levels in total and by pension activity to a peer group customized by size in the global pension universe. CEM has close to 72 pension systems participating from across the world in its services. TRS has been a participant with CEM benchmarking services since 2000. Every year, CEM presents the benchmarking study results to the TRS board. Last year, due to COVID, TRS did not participate in this benchmarking study. Therefore, this year's presentation is a little different. Today, we have Cam Mangat, who's Vice President CEM, is here to present the pension industry trends observed as a result of COVID and some other macro factors that have influenced our industry. So Cam, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here today with you to walk through some trends that we are seeing over at CEM. I'm going to share my deck with you all and turn off my camera if that's okay, just to make it easier to make me share the presentation. But please, at any time, just jump in if anybody has any questions. Let me see. Okay, I'm hoping you guys can see the presentation at this time. Let me just put it in full screen mode. There we go. So I'll walk through some of the trends that we're seeing over at CEM within the pension space. Thank you, Kavita, for the introduction. CEM is an objective and independent benchmarking company, and it's the only company that measures value for money in the pension space. As Kavita mentioned, we have 72 global pension systems that participated in just our pension administration benchmarking service. So you can see those pension plans listed on this page. And I will also highlight that we've got 3 major New York State-based pension plans that participate in our service amongst the very large plans throughout the United States. Turning to page 2. So these are the 4 key trends that we believe all pension plans should be keeping an eye on or consider when they're planning when they're going through their planning and budgeting process. The 4 key trends that I will be reviewing today include COVID-19, how it's changing work and disaster planning. Trend 2, pension systems are increasingly focused on IT. This has been an ongoing trend for a few years now. Number 3, cybersecurity is a big concern. Actually, now, given what's been going on in the world, we should list it as number 1. And then finally, more systems are focused on customer experience and organizing around customer journeys. So moving to page 4, starting with the first trend, how COVID-19 is changing work and disaster planning. Initially, when COVID-19 occurred, people thought the changes would be temporary, but the changes are now turning into be more permanent and are impacting various parts of pensions operations, including the workforce, business planning, and also how services are being delivered. For the workforce, Remote working is basically here to stay in some form or another. Some systems are making permanent changes in some departments. Other systems are going through hybrid type of arrangements. And as they're going through this, there's the process of going through formal policies and implementing those for their workforce. One area that we're finding that we've heard back from systems that are going basically to 100% remote working is in their contact centers. And we've heard a couple of systems even tell us that they're only going to have their employees come in once a month for monthly meetings, which is great. It has increased productivity, but then it has been creating other issues. A couple of issues include worker shortages, because now a lot of contact center employees can work from home. You have other companies, Fortune 500 companies, also targeting the same employee base. So you can have a financial services company that is operating out of another state, targeting New York State employees, for instance. And then this is also causing pressure on wages as well. So something to keep in mind as you think about your remote working policies. The other key thing that is impacting the systems as they are dealing with what has happened with COVID-19 is how they deal with their business continuity plans. Before, most were concerned with a physical location, but now when you have several employees working from home, you have several different physical locations. So how do you balance that with geographical diversification? Does it make sense now to think about having business continuity plans where, if something happened across New York State where most of your employees are also based, regardless of working at home or not, maybe you would have a facility or some kind of backup operation in another state on the other side of the coast. So these are some of the issues when it comes to business continuity planning that systems are dealing with. A real positive that has come out of COVID-19 is how services are delivered, especially when we think about one-on-one counseling and group presentations. This has been a big win. A lot of individuals have started taking advantage of these type of services, especially individuals that were reluctant to do online banking or using online services. With COVID, it's forced them to use these online services and they've gotten used to it. So these are services that they will continue to use. And a lot of systems are probably going to stay with delivering these services online. Moving to page 5, here we highlight the impact of COVID on service levels. Generally across the board, service levels decreased by 2.5 points. But we believe once the transition to certain services like virtual one-on-one presentations and group presentations, take hold, these trends should reverse. But the changes have been basically broad-based. Turning to page 6, these are examples of key service measures that have been impacted by COVID that have a significant impact on how we calculate service levels. I'm not going to go through all of these examples, but I'll highlight the first bucket, member contacts, since this is a key to all systems or a key concern to all systems. If we look at percentage of calls resulting in undesired outcomes, in 2019, that was 11.8% and increased by 19% to 14%. Average total wait times also increased, and average call durations also increased from 341 seconds to 376 seconds. Something interesting we heard from systems was that when the world was really shut down and individuals were at home, I guess because a lot of individuals didn't have a lot of different things to do, they were catching up on their to-do lists, and they were calling into their pension systems to get more educated and get on top of their pension plans. Maybe they were considering to retire, but there was a lot more call volume during those times as well.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So on the percent of calls resulting in undesired outcomes, mathematically, I think, I was never good at math, there are teachers in this room. The percent change was 2.2%, but the slide said it was a 19.1% change.
Order of
Like the
magnitude.
difference between the two.
Yeah,
What is that?
414 divided by 11.8 is probably it.
Okay. Somebody, Mike, you're gonna have to explain that to me offline, but I'm gonna go.
Yeah, it's increased. You're thinking percentage points.
Got
Right, as opposed to percentage change.
Right.
it. Okay. So,
There's somebody in the chat as well. Let me just,
You can ignore what's in the chat until later.
okay, perfect. Okay.
You don't have to field it at all, actually. 'cause
All right, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing any questions.
No, you're not.
Okay, great. Okay, moving on to page 7. The second trend, which is also an ongoing trend that we're seeing, is that systems are increasingly focused on IT spending. IT is a major component of costs for systems. Here on the right-hand side, we show a cost per member. It's an average of all the systems in our database. And you can see that, in 2013, IT and major costs per member was $41. It peaked in 2016 to $53, and then it had a downward trend. And in 2019, it was $41 and is starting to tick up again and is $43 in 2020. A lot of systems had already completed or taken on modernization programs, but there are still some systems that are upgrading their systems and doing changes to their IT programs. And then we're also seeing some systems that were lagging behind doing modernization programs for their IT systems are now doing them, are trying to catch up and doing them in earnest. Now, the good news is that members are benefiting from these IT investments. Here you can see that on the right-hand side, secure website visits has increased from 2013 to 2020, while calls and incoming mail has decreased, which is a good thing. The third trend we're noticing that is getting a lot of coverage as well is cybersecurity. It's not if, but more like when it will occur. And given what's been going on with Ukraine and governments advising companies to be on high alert for cyber crimes, it's pretty much reinforced that this should be top of mind for any executive. Some stats, just focusing on the middle of the slide. I know it's really busy. I'm just going to highlight some of the stats. $6 trillion is estimated in costs to the global economy from cyber crime every year. And then $1 trillion is estimated as the amount that global businesses will spend on cybersecurity products and services from 2017 to 2021. This data is about a year behind. It hasn't been updated yet, but this gives you a good idea as to the magnitude of costs involved. Now, the other key stat that I would like to highlight is that 3.5 million jobs are needed to fill cybersecurity needs by 2021. So again, this is a bit outdated, but that's up from 1 million in 2014. Currently, if we look at systems across the board, on average, they have 4 full-time equivalent employees dedicated to cybersecurity. This is expected to increase, but there is also a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. So there is going to be also wage pressure in this area as well. And then if you look at the bottom of the slide, there's several questions to think through as you think about your cybersecurity strategy or concerns. The fourth key trend, if we turn to page 10, is focusing on customer experience and customer journeys, basically using lean strategies organized around certain client events such as divorce, retirement, disability, to improve the service delivery and eventually reduce the costs. You know, this has been topical for about the last 2 to 3 years. The European systems have been building agile teams around journeys for a longer period than that. But this is picking up steam in the US. One example of a US fund implementing this type of strategy is they reduced their disability processing times from 6 months to 2 months. So there is, you know, real benefit in trying to think about how you deliver services around customer journeys. In 2020, if we move to page 11, CEM completed a customer experience research study, which focused on customer experience leaders. The CX acronym stands for customer experience. For customer experience leaders, there were some notable things that we found that was different about them compared to other organizations. First of all, they were well invested in the strategy, and it was part of their overall strategy. So it was incorporated at the high level. It had dedicated staff dedicated to this strategy. If we look at companies that only evaluate customer feedback, they had about 4 full-time equivalent employees compared to only 1 for everybody else in the universe. But systems that were dedicated to customer experience and were CX leaders, they had 6.9 full-time equivalent employees. The other key thing about customer experience leaders was there was buy-in for the strategy throughout the organization, including the board. So it was basically part of their ethos. So now I'll open it up for questions. I will.
Are there any questions for the trustees?
No, it's a great report.
I guess I just have one quick question about, did we see a ton of, was participation generally down across the board in the benchmarking study due to COVID?
No, it was, I think in previous years, we were around 76, 77 funds. So it did drop down to 72. It also depended on fiscal year end as well. So depending on where some systems have a fiscal year end of June and some have a fiscal year end of December. And in a lot of when we shut down in March 2020, the systems that participate in the June cycle tended to participate, whereas some of the funds that were December year end didn't necessarily participate because there was so much of an impact of COVID, but they're largely back. And now that they're back, they're also giving us previous year data as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Some of it wasn't, you know, it wasn't necessarily related to the fact that they went into COVID. Some of it was related to a resource issue because they were going remote and they're just, you know, pulling their workforce together to deliver the services. This became something they put on the back burner. So it's not necessarily that they didn't want to measure themselves. It was more a factor of resourcing.
Completely understand. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cam, for that presentation.
Great. Thank you for having me, and see you next year, I guess. Hopefully in person.
Yes.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, next on the agenda is questions and comments from the public. Do we have any? Okay, seeing none.
If we don't, I was waiting for anybody else to go because my question was kind of lengthy given the attachment that I sent in. So My name is Josh Sharma. I'm an IT professional in Sudbury, Massachusetts. I'm a beneficiary, and I would appreciate a good answer to why beneficiaries in 2022 don't have online access to their accounts.
Okay, so you're a beneficiary for a tax, you're a TDAB beneficiary?
Correct.
Is that right? So we are in the middle of a modernization project. I'll start by like bringing COVID into it because I think that all of our attention during COVID was to get as much functionality up online for our members to be able to interact with us without having to come into the office. And a lot of our IT resources were diverted in order to do that. And we are in the middle of a modernization project. And through that, in that project, we have to prioritize the work that we're doing in order to provide services to our members. And only 5% of beneficiaries even actually have a tax-deferred annuity TDAB plan. So the prioritization of getting that up on the website is not as great as other priorities for the things that we need to get up there. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do it. It is on our what we call roadmap. There will be functionality provided for TDAB. But I want to remind you, I'm not sure if you know, but we have closed our TDAB program. So it is really only now available to the people who were already in there. And that was less than 5% of all of our beneficiaries and much less percent than our entire population. So in our modernization, I want you to be assured that we will be working on that, but it will be later next year or the year after when we get to that functionality.
So that's a good answer. I've been asking the question for a lot longer than COVID, so just keep that in mind. I'd also like you guys to think about how much it costs for people who have questions to take up customer care time to have these questions. It's not just a matter of how many of us there are, it's how much it costs you to field our requests, however few of us there are, right? Like I said in the attachment that I've uploaded, I've already made 2 requests for callbacks for a simple question and scheduled a video conference. That's pretty expensive for you guys for what amounts to a 1-minute question. I mean, I wouldn't prioritize it in terms of how many of us there are. I'd prioritize it. I'm an IT professional. I think in terms of the cost of these programs. How much does it cost you to field our issues? So
okay, let me just explain something to you. So our call center, you're right, is like overwhelmed with calls. We get over 8,000 calls a week from members. And the 8,000 and 70% of those calls are on the status of a request they've made from us, from our members or beneficiaries on claims for their death benefits. We are working, so that's our highest priority. Let's get statuses on our website so that people stop calling our call center to ask for statuses. The next one is for people who want to withdraw their money. They want a hardship withdrawal or they want a membership withdrawal. Most of our calls have to do with that. So we're working on functionality on our website to make that easier and to provide them the information that they need so that they stop calling our call center. So I would say to you, you're right, it costs us money for us to interact with you, but it costs us much more money with the number of phone calls we're receiving from members looking for statuses, looking for withdrawals, asking us questions about their loans. So those are the things that we're prioritizing. And I assure you, we are going to do what you're asking, but it's just a matter of priority on the things that we're working on.
fair enough.
Okay. All right, and I'm hoping that if we can reduce those phone calls, your phone calls will come in much easier to us because we won't have all those people calling the call center and tying up the lines.
That is logical, and as the operations lady said earlier in the meeting, the letters for our MDs go out next month. So I'm not a patient guy, so you can probably tell, right? I like to self-serve. I want to be able to log in, look something up, and log off again and get back to business. So I won't take up any more of your guys' time. You guys are all busy folks.
All right, I'm glad that I was able to answer.
Thank you, David.
Take care. That was your friend.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the public? No. Okay, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're moving into executive session.
Does that every time.
Okay, we are back.
It's good money.
All right, Mr. McTeague, would you give us a readout, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the executive session, the board took up a personnel matter. The board also got an update on an investment matter, details to be made public at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Do we have anything else for the board meeting? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, okay, that was Mr. Brown, and that was the second by Mr. Kazansky. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.